So, as you can imagine, just judging by the incredibly obvious title on the bottom of the screen, and of course the title floating on the screen right now, these are my favourite movies of the year. Before we get into this video, there are 3 things I would just like to mention. 1. I haven't seen absolutely everything that came out this year, so there's more than likely stuff that won't be on this list purely because I'm lazy. 2. This is my own opinion, so there may be a movie that you think should be on this list, but isn't because I saw 10 movies that I like more than that specific film. And 3. These are my honourable mentions. Films that I really like but obviously didn't make the list. So, in no particular order, my honourable mentions include The Fate of the Furious. I really enjoyed this movie, but I did not like it as much as I did Fast 5, Fast and Furious 6, or Furious 7 for that matter, but it was still pretty good. Beauty and the Beast, a really fun musical with some excellent performances, and overall it was a really good retelling of a classic story, but my only complaint is that it doesn't bring anything new to the table. Kong Skull Island, very fun time in the cinema, and it has some really great action, but the characters, save for a few exceptions, were very hollow and in some cases pretty unlikable. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, a solid sci-fi film that had some pretty good performances and was all around pretty fun, but it wasn't anything particularly special. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Absolutely loved this movie when I first saw it, and I still do, but as the year went on, there was just more movies that I enjoyed more, but it's still a great film and a great sequel. Logan Lucky. I thought it was a really good movie, and I had a blast watching it, but it does suffer from some pacing issues in the first act. Annabelle Creation. One of the most enjoyable horror films of the year, and definitely great for an adrenaline rush, and a huge improvement over the first, but it does rely a little too much on jump scares. And my final honourable mention is, and a lot of you are going to hate me for this, Thor Ragnarok. I really enjoyed this movie, and it very nearly made my top 10, but I did have a few issues with it, and obviously there are 10 other movies that I happen to like more than Thor Ragnarok, but it's still such a good movie. Now, without further ado, let's get into what are, in my opinion, the 10 best movies of 2017, starting with number 10. Spider-Man Homecoming was so much better than I thought it would be. From the trailers, it just looked like a basic superhero movie, but what we got was, no pun intended, spectacular. This was such a great time in the cinema for me. Tom Holland is the definitive Spider-Man, and he's way more relatable as a character than the previous 2 incarnations were. The film is hilarious. It has by far the best villain in the MCU in the form of Vulture, portrayed excellently by Michael Keaton, and I loved how it was basically a high school drama meshed together with a superhero movie, and that combination made for a really great film. Honestly though, it was just good to see a Spider-Man film that was actually good, and for now anyway, Homecoming is my favourite Spider-Man movie. And my number 9 is... I can see a lot of people wanting to brutally murder me in the street for not putting this movie anywhere near the top 5, but the only reason it's not any higher on the list is because I would have loved to have seen more character development. But outside of that, Dunkirk is incredible. While I do wish there was more characterization, I do like that this was a film that was more about the experience of this side of the war. It's not really something I would call enjoyable, it's a very stressful and tense experience. This was so freaking tense that I found myself very firmly grabbing my brother's thigh thinking it was his hand. That was, very awkward. But is that a bad thing? No, of course not. That tension is part of the experience. But really, it's a great film, and it's cool to see Christopher Nolan doing something that's a lot different from his other stuff. And now for number 8. Finally, a great DC movie, for crying out loud! Yes! Yes! Sorry about that. Wonder Woman is the female superhero flick we have been waiting for far too long. Gal Gadot is fantastic in this movie. She reminds me so much of Christopher Reeve's Superman in terms of how inspiring she is as a role model, and she gets double the praise for managing to humanize one of the most iconic characters in comic book history, while kicking ass, of course. This movie is one of the best directed superhero movies I've seen in quite some time, and also, this is the best performance I've seen from Chris Pine. I absolutely loved him in this movie. As of now, Wonder Woman is my favourite entry in the DCEU, and it set the bar pretty darn high. Love it when I have a hiccup in the middle of a sentence. Anyway, number 7. Get Out is one of the most impressive directorial debuts in recent memory. Jordan Peele has made one hell of a good movie, and I can't wait to see what he does next. My favourite type of horror is often the stuff that scares you, but gets scarier the more you think about it. I do enjoy jump scares, but not too many jump scares. Get Out is not only a really chilling film, but it's a film that has something to say about racism, and it makes for an excellent commentary on race. It's also really funny at times, and extremely clever with its storytelling and subtle foreshadowing. Also, coming from someone who watches a lot of slasher flicks like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, it was so unbelievably refreshing to watch a horror film where the characters don't act like idiots for literally no reason or do hilariously dumb things, like trying to escape getting killed by someone by climbing through a doggy door, for example. There was nothing like that in this movie. All in all, this is a really good horror movie, and I urge you to check it out if you haven't seen it yet. And number 6. It is a super scary horror movie, and I really have to give it praise for that, but the reason it's even on this list is because it's a super scary horror movie and a lot more. I love the friendship between the kids. Whenever they were on screen, I felt invested, and I cared for each and every single one of them. And that's part of what made it so terrifying, because I cared about these characters, and I didn't want any of them to die. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise is one of the most menacing, creepy, and just downright haunting portrayals of a horror villain I've seen in quite some time. I gotta tell you, this movie has one of the scariest opening scenes I've ever sat through. I was squirming in my seat, okay? And now we're into the top 5, people, starting with number 5. I was very surprised to find how divisive this movie is. Some people loved it, some people hated it, and some people liked it but felt it wasn't as good as the previous 2 movies in the trilogy. I think it's a masterpiece. The motion capture work is the best I have ever seen. Andy Serkis gives what is probably his best motion capture performance since Gollum in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. A lot of people were mad that it was called War for the Planet of the Apes, and there really isn't a lot of action. For me, the war was more of an internal conflict, a psychological battle, if you will. There is some huge action sequences, don't get me wrong, and they are amazing, but I think the psychological battle that we got is far more compelling than a Saving Private Ryan-like story, but with apes. Also, Steve Zahn as Bad Ape is one of my favourite movie characters of the year, as well as one of my favourite performances of the year. Moving on to number 4. For a good while, I kept saying to myself this would be my number 1 on the list when I first saw Baby Driver. But there were just 3 other movies that I liked ever so slightly more. That said, I still freaking love this movie. Baby Driver is one of the most unique action movies I've seen in a while based on the approach alone. It's essentially an action musical. Everything goes to the beat of whatever song is playing, like the gunshots, the editing, and even the graffiti on the walls. Some may find that quite jarring, but for me that made the film so much more fun, and the action is just brilliant, particularly the car chases. Also, I think that Ansel Elgort as Baby is going to go down in history as one of the greatest action heroes of this generation. Enough said. Number 3. This is one of the best sci-fi movies I have seen in years, and one of the best sequels I've seen in years. And the more I think about it, I would say yes, Blade Runner 2049 is a better film than the original film. But that aside, this movie is just amazing from start to finish. The world building is some of the best world building I have ever seen. This world actually feels like it could exist. The performances from basically everyone are amazing, particularly from Gosling and Ford. I was engaged from the first frame all the way to the last, and I don't know about you guys, but I didn't even notice the 2 hour and 44 minute runtime. It was that good, and honestly, I really want to see it again. And now for number 2. Logan is the Wolverine movie I have wanted since the first X-Men movie. But to say it's just that is an understatement. Hugh Jackman gives the best performance as Wolverine and possibly the best performance he's ever given. Every time I watch this movie, I'm crying at the fact that this is the last time we'll see Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart in these roles. Or I'm crying tears of joy watching Wolverine kick some ass for one last time and finally giving us those bloody and gruesome berserker attacks that we've all been wanting to see. Logan was compelling, sad, and by far the darkest movie in the X-Men franchise so far. But I would say it's easily the best. And now, the moment you've probably not been waiting for because it's so dang obvious. I know, this was pretty obvious from the start. But the reason Star Wars The Last Jedi is my favourite movie of the year is because when I was watching it, I was literally locked on a screen. My brother kept tapping me on the shoulder to ask me a question, and I just completely ignored him. I just could not turn away from what I was seeing on screen because I haven't been this enthralled by a Star Wars movie since The Empire Strikes Back, and that is really saying something. From the opening crawl all the way to the film's climax, I was just mind-blown. And when I got out of that cinema, I was still shaking, and I could not, and still haven't stopped talking about this movie. Nothing, absolutely nothing, went the way I thought it was going to go. And because it was so unpredictable, I was just mesmerized because with each passing scene, I just had no idea where the film was going to go with its story. And that is what made Star Wars The Last Jedi one of the best cinematic experiences I have ever had, and my favorite cinematic experience of the year. So, those were my favorite movies of 2017. I do hope you enjoyed this video. I'm probably going to have a bounty on my head just for putting The Last Jedi at my number 1, but oh well. Before I end the video, I would just like to ask you guys, what were your favorite movies of the year? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and also, Happy New Year! And, you know, also don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, yeah, and also don't forget to like and subscribe, yeah, the usual stuff, yeah. Yeah, now, instead of spending the next 5 minutes trying to figure out what else to say, I'm just going to get out of your hair and let you enjoy your day. So, yeah, bye.